Okay. So when it comes to forms in Angular, we have two types of forms, right? One is template driven and the other one is React forms. Okay, so both are different. Template driven forms are basically part of the Angular framework, but whereas the React forms is basically a borrowed concept from React.js. Okay, so here there are like two different approaches altogether, and because these two are like different approaches, we have two different modules. Okay, so one is the forms module. This is for template driven forms, and the other one is React forms module. Okay, this is for reactive approach. Okay, so if you are going to use forms module, then you have to import this module into your app module. Or if you want to use reactive forms module, then you have to import this module. Okay, so if you import one module and try to use other module features, it will not work. Okay, and if your form is very simple and there is not much thing, not much complexity is there, then you can go for forms module. But if there is complexity and your form has many fields and that all the fields have validations and stuff like that, like dependent elements, like one element depends on other field, and sometimes the other dependent fields like password confirmation, right? So you'll enter password in one field and in another field you will just for confirmation you'll ask user to enter once again. Okay, so those cases we should it will be easy for the developer to go for this reactive forms model, because it offers some features which will reduce a lot of coding. Okay, so in order to use template driven forms, as we discussed, we have to import the forms module, and once forms module is imported, then we can use okay, here this is just a simple form. Okay, there is no forms related features are added. I mean form module features added here. So let's go to the next topic. So here we can see ng model. Okay, this ng model directive is from the forms module. Okay, so in order to bind this input box to Angular variable, I mean Angular variable meaning the component variable, then you can go for ng model directive. Okay, whenever you put this is bound. I mean this input box is bound. Okay, you are telling Angular that this is a ng model. Model means data. Okay, and even for this also we are using same thing. Okay, so now these two are ng model elements, and then you have a submit button. Okay, and whenever you have submit button, we have another function handler called ng submit. Just like click or double click, we have event handlers, right? The same way for forms we have ng submit. Okay, this is a submit functionality handler. Okay, whenever you click on a button
I
which
can't hear
has
you actually. Suddenly your voice is very low.
oh, is it? I
Oh,
think it's my network issue.
no. It's I don't know. By mistake, it went to from speaker to normal in this one. Okay.
Oh, okay, fine. So I was saying that in a form we'll have a submit button, right? So there will be a
Yeah.
button which has type like submit, and that means that is a submit button. So when you click on that button, there is an event handler on the form. Okay, not on the button, but on the form. Okay, this is called ng submit. So this one basically triggered when you click on submit button. So that one basically calls this on submit method, and you can write any method name here. I just wrote on submit, but it can be anything, some function. It must be some function. Okay, and on submit method will have some validation logic or something, or like calling a backend API to save this data in the database. So that kind of stuff we can write in this method. Okay, so basically if you write ng model, that becomes a model object and model element, and then when you submit that form, these two will be submitted to this on submit method. But here I'm not passing anything. Okay, this is just representation purpose. I'm not passing either this one, course name, or course description. Okay, so now it will not work. When you submit on this thing, submit button, it will just call this method if it is available. Otherwise, it will throw error. Okay, and in order to set default data, you can basically use this square brackets to set the default data inside that. Okay, here we didn't use any square brackets. We are just it's kind of a marker directive. This is marking this element is a ng model, but here we are setting, we are marking it as a ng model, and then we are setting some default data. Okay, this will be whenever Angular execute this line, this will put this value inside this text box by default. Okay, and yeah, I think we covered this two-way binding in data binding, right? So the one-way binding is code to template or template to code,
Yeah.
but two-way binding is both ways. Okay, when you put this syntax, it will be two-way binding.
Yeah.
So submitting a form, how to submit a form? So basically the intention of a form, web form, is to collect data from the user, right? So it can be any form. It can be login form, sign up form, or student details form, department details form, anything, right? So the intention of a form is to collect data from the user. So here what data we are collecting? We are collecting course name and we are collecting course description. And we have button submit button called add, and we have clear button called clear. Okay, so when user clicks on add, and as we discussed in the previous example, this method will be called. Okay, on submit event will be triggered, and after on submit event triggered, then this method will be called. So this method we are passing a C form. C form is nothing but the reference variable. This is template reference variable, right? In the templates we saw, if you put hash and then give some name, that becomes a reference variable to this element. Okay, from here to here. Okay, basically we are assigning a name. Okay, it's like a variable, and we are assigning a name to that the template. Okay, this is template here till here, and we are assigning some name and of type ng form. Okay, so if you assign, basically if you don't assign this thing, okay, it doesn't know which kind of element this is. Okay, so now we have to put ng form, so that okay, this form is basically the C form is a of type ng form. Okay, now that this C form is now available across this template, whole template. Okay, it's like a variable. Okay, now we are passing that variable to on submit method, and in on submit method you can write this method, and basically it is receiving ng form, right? So this ng form, and variable name is C form. Okay, when we send the C form here, it will receive, and in that method what we are doing, we are just printing the course name and course description. How can we access those? You can basically use form.value.course name, form.value.course description. If you try to print just form.value, it will print the whole object, course name and course description in an array. So this is one way of getting data from the form. The other way is you can use view child to look in the this template and find anything having a variable C form, template reference variable C form. Okay, so this is what we are doing. View child means inside this template, look for child elements which are having this variable name. Okay, that is this one. Now this is, as we saw, this one is ng form, right, type. So that's the reason we defined ng form. Okay, and we gave a variable. So basically, just forget about this. Just look at this. This is course form of type ng form, and from where it is coming. Now look at this view child. View child is basically happens in the template. Okay, so whatever template this component is holding, it will look in that template and find any variable mapped with this name. So if it founds, then it will take that reference and keeps in this variable. Okay. In later stages, you can basically use this reference to get data. So just like in onClear, what we're doing, we are getting the course form here, and then just calling the reset function. Okay. This function allows us lot of functions. The ngForm class gives us many functions. So one of the functionality is a reset functionality. So by calling the reset functionality, all the fields which are mapped as ng model will be reset. Okay, the values will be cleared. Only which are marked with ng model. So other fields it will not do anything if you don't put this ng model. Okay. So now what we are doing, we are basically clicking on submit button, and on submit method will be called with the cform reference, and this can be any reference. You can give any random name. Okay. This means the meaning of this is basically course form. That's the reason I gave it as cform. So you are passing it a reference, and here you're trying to access data. So this is one way. The second way is you can get the reference and assign it to the some variable of type ngForm, and this variable you can use, and you can basically reset it, or you can get also like this dot course form dot value dot course name. Okay, that also will work. Even for this also you can say this dot course form dot value dot course description. Okay, so this is how
So
you
we
can
have
get.
to, do
Yeah.
we have to define both like the view child and this one,
No,
like
it's
you
not.
did?
It's not necessary. There are two types, right? So how can you get
Yeah.
data from a form to your code? Code means your component class. Either you can pass the reference like this into some method, and then get that values like this, or you can just remove this entirely. Still, it will work because we are taking a reference this way. Okay, taking the reference is different here, but the entire functionality is same. Okay, so either you can take reference like this, or you can pass that reference from the template.
Okay. So here then the reset line for the second one is will be this dot form dot reset, right? If I'm not defining view child.
Exactly. So here, what you have to do is you have to pass that reference here into this method, just like this, and then you can this
Okay.
dot form dot reset.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, got it.
I think let me check if I have that example ready. Yeah, I think that example ready. Component dot txt. Okay. So here I don't have anything, right? So I'm not passing that event. On submit doesn't take any parameters. Okay. So I
Mm.
have view child, and instead of C form, I gave course form, and of type ngForm, and I'm taking this dot course form dot
Okay.
value. I'm printing the
Value.
entire value instead of
Yeah.
printing single fields. And here
Yeah.
also I'm using same reference, this reference dot reset. Okay, so you can see there will be a lot of methods. Okay, I just did control space, and there are a lot of methods. And yeah, this is basically the template driven forms, and you can add validations also to the template driven forms. So how can you add validations? Basically, instead of the form level, you can give a reference variable at the input level. Okay, input variable level. Okay, so I'm telling this field is required. Okay, I'm telling this field is required, but how to show the error message when user doesn't enter the value? Okay, so that time for that what you have to do is we have to basically assign a variable. Because this is a course name, I gave it as C name equals to ng model. Okay, this is of type ng model, right? Okay, because this is ng model. So when you mark this as ng model, then this entire thing is bounded to this variable from the component. So this is the ng model type. That's the reason we assigned the type. And now this is where we show the error message, this section. So what we are doing here to show the error message, we're taking the reference, okay, the CNAME reference we are taking, dot errors, okay. If there are any errors, this will become true. And if CNAME is dirty means if someone entered some value and cleared it. Okay, if someone entered some value and then removed it, then it will become dirty. And touched means the form is touched, meaning somebody clicked on that field and then clicked somewhere else. That time the touched variable will become true. Okay, and then if these two are true, then we'll get into this part. So here what we are saying, if cname dot errors dot required, okay, cname errors can be many types. This is basically mandatory field. That's the reason we marked it as required. But in some cases, you might mark it for email validation. Okay, email validation is different and required is different. So let's say this field itself has email validation and required both. Now, for email validation, what you can say, the entered email is wrong. Okay, please correct the entered email. That is a message you'll show. So for that, you will have one more section below and check for that email validation instead of required. Okay, but here what we're doing, we are checking for required validation. So that's the reason we're putting c dot errors of required. So if it contains any errors and if there is a required type error, then we show this message, course name is required. Otherwise it will not go. Let's say email address format is wrong, then what we can do, cname dot errors of email, then email id syntax is wrong or email id format is wrong. Okay, so let's do that example here. Yeah, so let me go show the code. So I defined two fields here, course name and course description for that form. And let me go to the HTML. In the HTML, I copy pasted that entire HTML from our website. Now I added validations here, and also just to show you that what these values will have. Okay, what is cname.dirty and what is cname.touched and what is cname.errors. So let's see how these values will be changed when we do actions on the UI. Okay, so I'm just printing what values these fields will hold. So now apart from these three, I didn't change anything in this form. Okay, I have a cname variable reference variable assigned here for the course name, and so for course description, I didn't add any reference variable because I just want to show for one variable. Okay, one engine model. Now let's go here. So it is saying required is true, false, false. Okay. So for this, it is saying required is true. Okay. It is basically on an object, right? So this is an object, and this is key, and this is value. So required value is true here. That means this is mandatory field, but I didn't enter any value there. That's the reason this is by default true. Okay. Now coming to, so now the errors has one error which is required error. Okay, so the field is required but you didn't enter, so that is one error. So now this will have one error. And coming to the second value is false here. Okay, so if I enter something here, so form was pristine means no one touched that form. So that's the reason for the first time when comes to this page, the form status will be pristine in Angular. And now once I clicked on the form, I mean the text box, and I entered something. Okay, so now you see the error is gone. Okay, the required true error is gone. It is showing error means null means cname.errors doesn't have any errors. And then second value become true. Why it become true? Because we made it dirty. Okay, so let me refresh here and enter some value. Okay, and whenever I enter value, this become true because it was pristine earlier and we enter some value, it become dirty. And when I remove this, now all values become true because it is mandatory field, you didn't enter any data. That's the reason this came and we entered value and we removed it. That's the reason it became dirty. And third value, let's see again how third value. So if you touch this and click somewhere else, that become touched. Okay. So I click on this and I click somewhere else and this became true. Okay. That means we basically touch that form. So why we have to put all these things? Why can't we just show this error, right? Let me comment this line. Let me comment this line also. Okay, I just remove the div. Let me go back. Okay, just let me remove ng here from here. Okay, so whenever I come to this form, by default it is showing course name is required because the required is true by default. This is required field. We didn't enter any data. That's the reason the cname.error has this value, and then it is showing this error by default. Even we didn't do anything. So that is a bad user experience, right? So user didn't do anything, but still you are showing error message. That's a bad user experience. So in order to avoid that user experience, bad user experience, then we can add these conditions. Now we can just add this one. Why we are adding these two, right? So let me remove these two. Okay, still this is coming because this required is true. This is true, and cname.errors has some value. Okay, which is this value. That's the reason. Again, it will be considered as true if it has any values. The two conditions are true. That's the reason it is showing this is required. So what we have to do? Whether we have to check whether user entered some value and then removed it. So that is one case. Or if user touched that field and then went on to second field, so that time in these two conditions, either of these two conditions, we have to show this error. Okay, for that case, we have to put and. So errors must be present and either user deleted that field or user touch that field. Okay, so in these two cases, and if it has any errors, then show respective message. Okay, so this is how we can show error message. Now if I refresh, let me save this. Okay, and let me refresh, the error is gone. So by default form will not show any errors, but when user clicks it and then clicks on somewhere else, then we show course name is required because this is true and this is true. Okay, either of this must be true. In that case, we show the error. Or user entered some value and removed it, then still we show because this is required true and it is dirty and it is touched. Okay, all conditions are true. So this is basically a good user experience. Okay, and yeah, these are form validations. Yeah, this is basically a template driven approach. So let's go to reactive forms modules. Okay, reactive forms module basically it will have code related to a reactive approach. Okay, basically code related to how to basically bind variables to an object or class, and then how to do the validations. Okay, so all these things we can handle through this module.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here. So let's. Okay, so now as we discussed in the previous topic, in order to use reactive forms, we have to import this module. Okay, reactive forms module in app module, and then what we can do is we can define a form group. Okay, this form group and form control and validators, right? So all this basically comes from the reactive forms module. Okay, so when you import React Forms module, then only you will be able to use these classes. Okay, now in order to basically create a React form, okay, reactive form, what we have to do is we have to define a form group. Okay, form group is basically why we call it as a group, because it will hold form fields. Okay, list of form fields. Okay, group of form fields. That's the reason we call it as a form group. And then each field is of type form control. Okay, so you can have any number of form controls in a form. Basically, each form control represents an input field from the template. Okay, so we have 4 fields defined here. Then this form, the contact form, will have 4 fields in the UI or the view. Okay, now how to define a form, right? So basically we have to define a variable of type form group, and we have to assign that variable with a new form group. Basically you have to create a new class, a new object for this form group, and inside it will take an object. Okay, when you see this brackets, right, this is an object in JavaScript. So in the form group we have a group of elements. Okay, this is one element, and this is one, this is one, this one. Okay, and here basically we are sending it as null, but we can send a default value, and we can basically set some validators, right? So that will come next. But uh, from how we can bind an entire form to an object, right? So this is an object definition, React form object definition, and in the UI you can have a form, and that form will basically bound to all these 4 fields. Okay, and the other syntax we have, the better syntax, right? So using form builder service, okay, the same reactive forms module basically gives us form builder service, and just inject that form builder service, and then use that form builder reference to create this form group, Okay, so here what we did, the form builder dot group, and group is again an array, just like this one, but the main difference is you don't have to create objects for the form control. Okay, instead you can have key as name just like this, but right side you can use this array syntax, and you can define that value. So this default value is empty here. Okay, so I'm setting default value is empty, and second one is I can add validators. Okay, so validators basically I'm saying this field is required. Okay, this is a mandatory field, and other 3 fields are non-mandatory fields. Okay, so this is far better when compared to this one, because you don't have to remember this form control or form group. So now this will return a new form group, and even this will become return a new form group. Only thing is the syntax is different. So this syntax is different, and this syntax is different. Okay, I prefer this over this most of the time. And now in HTML, how it will look, right? So whenever you use reactive forms, you have to use a directory called form control name. Okay, so form control name must match one of these variables or one of these fields. Here it is name, and here it is form control name equal name, and here it is email, and here it is email. Same way subject and message. Okay, so we didn't do anything. Okay, so we added only form control name for each input field, and we map using the common key. Key is this one and this one. And apart from that, what we did is we used this form group directive to assign this reference, exactly this reference here. Okay, now what will happen, this entire form is bound to this form group, and each field inside that bound to each field in that form group. Okay, so inside that form group, so now basically these two are tightly bound, this one and this one is tightly bound. So now what will happen? Whenever you submit this form using the submit button, we still call the use that ng submit directive, and we can call some method. So we can basically get the form data and use it as we wish. Okay. Now, so how to set a default values inside the React forms, right? So first value, as I said, inside this definition, is a value field. Okay, whatever value you set here will be set into that field. So when you set name field as default value, then this input box in the UI will have default value. Okay, the string default value. The same way you can define all the fields which needs to be having a default value when user enters to that form, when user goes to that form. Okay. And how can you do validations in the reactive forms, right? So reactive forms validations is very easy. Only thing is you have to use the second value in this array or second value in this form control class as validators. Okay. So this is the default value. First parameter, second parameter is validators. So let's say you have more than one parameter, one validator. Then what you can do is you can use an array again, and then inside that we can comma separate and provide all the validators. Okay, this has two validators. One is it's a email ID validation, and apart from this should match some syntax. Okay, this syntax or the pattern. So then only this will become true. And we have another validation called min length. So this field will take more than 10 characters. Otherwise, it will fail. The validation for this will fail. And the validation of requirements, this is a mandatory field. This one and this one. Okay. So now how can we do it in the code? How can we show errors in the code? Okay, we just added validations, but how can we show the validation errors in the code? So here, just like the template driven forms, so we already have this contact form reference variable from the class. Okay, this one, and I am just taking that contact form dot get basically returns any specific element. Okay, I'm just using name here. So because I want to get errors for this field. Okay, name field. So the same name field we have to use here. The contact form has a name field, right? So contact form dot give me name field, and once the name field is given, check whether it is invalid. Okay, invalid means one of these errors, one of this validation failed. It can be this one, or one of this validation can be failed for this field. So we are working on name field, right? So let's look at this. We have validator required. Okay, if this field is not provided, then this will become true. And then if that form is touched, okay, if user entered some value, removed it, or where he touched, right? So basically when the form is touched, then that time if invalid, and if it is touched, then only show please enter valid username error. Same way, if contact form, the email is invalid or email has any errors, if it has any errors, then again and if it is touched, then show please enter valid email. Okay, and then we have text area also, but we were not we did not have any validations here. Okay, now when you submit, it will go to this method, and in that method basically you can basically get the values. So how can you get values? We can in the TypeScript class we already have reference to the contact form, right? So this one. So what we can do is this dot contact form dot valid. So if it is valid, the entire form, okay, there is no single validation error, then only this valid field will become true. That means this dot contact dot valid will become true. If that is true, then we can print the form, entire form. If it is false, we can show some error message. There are errors in the form, and that errors will be displayed along with the entire form. Okay, just below the text field, you can show the error messages, respective error messages. Okay, that will happen only this one is failed. Otherwise, in case of success, we can basically, I'm just printing it here, but we can basically send that data to some backend API to save that data in the database. Okay, and then so there is one more thing we can do with the forms is this React forms. You can listen to the changes. Okay, if someone change a single character in the entire form in any field, then you can subscribe to that subscribe. We have value changes subscribe observable, so we can subscribe to that changes. Then any single character you change in the entire form, then it will send that data to the subscriber. Okay, basically subscribers, the observables and subjects, right? So they are they're basically kind of listeners, right? So when you listen to that, so anytime someone changes some field in the form, then this method will be called, and whatever I highlighted, right? So it will be executed even for a single character change also. It can be any number of times. As user changing the values, this method will be called continuously. If you want to listen for a single field changes, then you can do contact form. Instead of value changes, you can get a single field. Okay, how can you get single field? Get and the name of that field, and then you can do the same again, value changes, and then subscribe. Okay, then we'll print it here. So normally where we use this one, if user is typing something in the UI, then sometimes we need to show suggestions, right? So like drop down, in the drop down we show suggestions. In those suggestions case, you can go for this approach. Okay, as user started entering some value in this name field, we can call every time the backend API to get the suggestions and show it in the UI. And apart from that, if you don't want to enable submit button to the user, you want to hide that submit button, then we have a disabled directive, and we can take that form reference, right? So in the previous example, we were checking whether that form is valid or not here. So okay, the contact form not valid. The same way here, what we can do is that form dot valid. We can check if it is valid, then negation. Okay, if it is valid, then this form this is not disabled. If it is not valid, this will become basically true, and we negate it. Okay, it will become false. Okay, if it is not for if it is not valid, then we'll disable this button. If it is form is valid, we enable this button. Okay, so any questions? That's any questions?
Hello.
Yes, Sajita, can you hear
Hello.
me?
Okay, I was actually in the airport. I don't know why when I'm talking you can't hear.
Okay.
Okay.
You might need to reset the AirPods again.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you have any questions so far?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
Oh, okay then. Yeah, I'm ending this session because I have to take another class.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank
Thank
you.